Welcome to another Ask Dr. John video episode. This is a conversation between a father and a daughter, my father, Dr. John F. Leeke, and yours truly, Ananda Leeke, about our book. It is his memoir, American Change Agent, a life and legacy of seeking diversity, equality, and inclusion. How are you, Dr. John?
I'm fine. I'm ready. I've been looking forward to what we're going to talk about today because it's very exciting.
All right. Everything about the book is exciting, y'all. Let me tell you, he's a first-time author and he's hitting it out of the ballpark. All right. So today, this is what we're talking about, the Underground Railroad. That's right. We have a direct connection that we know about. We know that most people of African descent in America that experienced some form of slavery had a connection to the Underground Railroad at some point in time. Somebody somewhere, we know that there's a connection. For us, the Leeke family, the Leeke family of Hagerstown, Maryland. My dad's great grandfather, Peter Leeke, was born in Hagerstown in 1799. Well, let me back up. We don't know exactly if it was Hagerstown. It was Maryland. That's
Uh,
what we know from the
yes.
Canadian census. And his great grandmother, Catherine Leake, was born in 1811 in Maryland. Together, they had 14 children, including his great grandfather, Leonard Leake, who was born in Hagerstown, Maryland in 1825, which actually this year marks the 200th anniversary of Leonard Leake's birthday. Shout out to my great grandfather, Leonard Leake. So, this amazing Leake family, Leek, they were a group of 16 people who escaped slavery from Hagerstown, Maryland around 1839. And from an obituary of my great grandfather, Leonard Leake, that was published in the Lansing State Journal, that's a paper in Michigan, we learned from his obituary that they escaped by walking, by horse and buggy, and by steamships. So their trip of 410 miles. We mapped it on Google Maps from Hagerstown, Maryland to Amherstburg, Canada. They traveled through Maryland all the way up to Cleveland, Ohio, and that's where they were able to get a steamship. That steamship took them across the Detroit River. Shout out to everybody in Detroit, you know. From there, they landed in Amherstburg, Canada. And we know from the Canadian census that they were there. We also know from a museum that is based in Amherstburg that one of the members of the family, Isaac Leake, who was a brother of Leonard Leake, he married into one of the big families there. And that Freedom Museum, I'm not recalling the exact name, it's based in an AME church. That museum has a summary about the major families, the freedom seeking families, and the folks that made their home in Amherstburg and the surrounding areas. And so we were able to track it. And I want to stop and just ask you, Dr. John, how did you feel when I shared this information with you?
Yeah, Ananda, as I talked about in the previous one that we talked about the African ancestry, uh, I think we know, Black people in this country, we know that our roots and our people pretty much. are going to go back to slavery, uh, and there are different ways in which people, the Black African people, became free, and some, of course, not only they became free, but they got sold back into slavery and so forth. So we now do know a lot about our history. And it's so troubling, like right now, to realize that there is such a movement now to wipe out that history and to try to act as though slavery had never existed. um, but when I saw the article in the Lansing, Michigan newspaper that described my great grandfather, I, I was taken aback that, oh my, I actually have documentation that said that my ancestors had come through in terms of reaching freedom through the Underground Railroad. I know all about the Underground Railroad, uh, but to now know that I have that to prove that's that my family was a part of going through and becoming free through the efforts of the Underground Railroad. The kinds of things that we know about Harriet Tubman and
Mm.
others who helped the people along that route. And just to think of traveling 400 miles in the different forms of getting from where they left Maryland until they got to Canada, and all of the things that people did who assisted those folks. It's uh, it, 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 it's amazing, and
Yeah.
and it also makes me feel extremely proud, and to think that they did those things, and it makes you say, you know, I got to do my share. And part of doing my share now is this book, to tell my story and to tell my story from the beginning and have the connections that we know are so true in terms of, quote, American history. And you cannot talk about American history and not talk about the black part of that American history, and to talk about slavery. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do get a bit emotional about it.
And the one thing I want to also say is that as people of African descent, our history doesn't start with slavery. There
No,
was an African presence here in America way before. And if you look at the books of Ivan Van Sertimer, you look at some of the work that our own cherished Anthony Browder has done. If you go to the Thurgood Marshall YMCA on 12th Street in Northwest DC, and you go to the John Henrik Clark Enhanced History Project, you're going to learn more. This is a free resource. Anthony Browder, we call him Tony Browder. He does amazing work. He has a program on WPFW that tells you about our history as African people. It's deeper, it's richer. Then make a trip to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Go to the historical sites in your city. Every city has some form of African American history. It's one of the things that I grew up with. in terms of understanding and that I have made as a personal investment to my own well-being, my own understanding. So I encourage you to use the resources that are out there. But for those that have readily act that have access to these different museums, including the Reginald Lewis Museum in Baltimore, all of these places have our history. The Reginald Lewis Museum in Baltimore has one of the best Maryland history exhibits about the African American presence in the state of Maryland, which really got me to make a trip to the African American Museum that is in Hagerstown. I did that on my 59th birthday, and I said I wanted to walk the streets where my ancestors were. I wanted to be as close as I could. I walked along a street that they probably used to exit Hagerstown. I stood in front of a church that was really responsible for helping people, freedom seekers, enslaved people seeking freedom. It was an AME church. We don't have exact documentation, but I was able to be where they were. That was very important for me. So, do you have anything you want to say before we close out? Because we could go on and on and on, but we want you to read the book, American Change Agent, A Life and Legacy of Seeking Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion, which is available on all of the online platforms where you buy books. Anything you want to say, Dr. John?
No, I I just now really, because the book is available, I just am encouraging my friends, my colleagues, strangers, anyone to uh, uh, to get the book and then allow yourself to uh, read the book. And one of the really wonderful aspects that we made a very conscious choice about because we had the access to them are the numerous photos of my ancestors and then photos as I moved along in my life. So I it's a plus piece.
Yeah, definitely. All right, everybody. You can learn more about American Change Agents, A Life and Legacy of Seeking Diversity, Equality and Inclusion by Dr. John F. Leake and yours truly, Ananda Kiyamsha Madeline Leake, by going to anandaleek.com / Dr. John. anandaleek.com / Dr. John. The book is available for $20 on all of the online platforms. If you hang out on the webpage, you'll get information as the weeks go by about the upcoming book launches that we'll be having this summer as well as into the next year. Have a wonderful one. See you next time. Bye.